and the usual kind of speaking from the civil society side, the kind of activities that civil society does, but it's open also to private sector and other kinds of interest groups that attend the Secretariat Forum. So if any among the members want to utilize that space, please get in touch with Diana and let her know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mashet.
There will be more
discussions around the Secretary General's Forum for those who are interested.
Together with the
question around exhibitions and all that. I'm sure the NDC process itself is going on. So at some point we'll be able to hook into that ongoing process.
Okay.
Any new who have come in? I want to recognize Zainab Mohammed. Thank you very much for being in the meeting.
Colleagues,
any further issues? So that we start winding up the meeting.
And then we take a break. So let me see. I think just to speak a bit to will be the second plan.
Yeah.
This is
going to be the second plan. The first one was of course the 2020. That's the immediate plan. I know we had a lot of consultation.
Will be the
second plan. I think there's a lot.
This is going to be the
plan. Since we're going to have this one, it might just be useful to say 20, around the 20. That's the immediate plan. We had a lot of consultation.
Will be the
second plan. I think there's a lot. This is going to be the plan. Since we're going to have this one, it might just be useful.
The
East African Community Treaty. Because our role is to around 2020,
so a lot of the things we do are also in line. So to speak,
the second plan. This is going to be the might just be useful. Environmental protection and the East African Community Treaty. Then because our role is all these actually areas of cooperation around 2020. The immediate. So a lot of areas in the also line the partner states. So this is going to be because our role is all these actually areas of cooperation around that the immediate. So a lot of areas in the also line the partner states. All these actually areas of cooperation.
It's always very important for us to Okay, I think we are more or less close. We are more or less now. Come back. Thank you for that. Yes, as I noted again, when the consultant comes to explain to us how we apply the process, and this is just a reminder. These are the kind of things that I will for, and of course they can still inform. So I don't know how best to do it. So I'll read you again. Perhaps one is able to write one that is right. So the very first one is the democratic governance. The very first one is the democratic governance. And this is just a reminder. But also governance at country level. And of course the organization of the court, justice, that is part of then there's peace and security. I I know we throw into a lot of discussions about how the regs text part and but also there's a lot of that, but perhaps again we'll have to solve what they want to see. They want to dig deeper. Then number three, social and economic justice. Social and economic justice. Social and economic justice. Oh, thanks a lot for putting those down. Social and economic justice. Number four, agriculture, natural resources. Agriculture, natural resources. Environmental protection is a long one. Agriculture, natural resources, environmental protection, and climate change. Now you see issues around blue economy feature there. So those are the new, perhaps new areas that we want to start thinking about. So it's agriculture, natural resources, environmental protection, and climate change.
You can actually do before.
And finally, mainstreaming science and technology. Mainstreaming science and technology. So those are the five areas of work in the previous strategic plan.
Okay, can we give it a thought, please?
Come again, please.
We can have a blue economy as it is very, very wide, because blue economy does not come from Mombasa only. We have the lakes also.
Yes.
In Kisumu, we can have it as the sixth cluster, as it involves a lot of things. It's not about fishing only.
Yes.
It's concerning the trade, and the Eacsof is partly mambo yake makubwa sana ni ya trade.
Yes.
And how we can link with other countries outside Kenya.
Okay.
On sustaining our blue economy.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mashet, you had a point?
Sorry, I agree as a proposal, but then it falls within agriculture, natural resources, because the blue economy is looked at as part of the natural resources. So we could say the least we want to do is this recognized within the strategic plan, but they may still argue for still clustering it under that.
Okay.
Yeah, but be raised out as a substantive area.
Okay. Yeah. Mama Shamsa, I hope you've had that, so it can be looked at within the number 4. Again, I must emphasize again, these are themes of the previous strategic plan. So we are going to get guided in terms of how we canvass any specific issues, any new areas that we may want to bring up into the new strategic plan that is being worked out. Final comments. I see the time is really up. Anything new on the comments on the okay, all right, so thank you very much. I think we now bring this to a close, and if there's anything that we've forgotten that we may still want to talk about, then within the 2 hours that we'll be talking to the consultant, we should then be able to also have time to just raise those issues. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the first session that I think we've done successfully, and we look forward to the next session. Diana, you can tell us how we're going to get tea. Like, I'm talking about the tea because I may have skipped breakfast.
Recording stopped.
So once again, just to appreciate the first session, which I think went fairly well, and we were able to look at where we are in terms of the activities going on and so on. And I know that the Secretariat will keep updating us. As we have the consultant who will take us through the process, and I can see he has already connected online. Richard, how are you? Long time. It's good to hear your voice after a long time. Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Just to kind of bring you up to speed so that you also know where we're coming from. We've been having an internal meeting for Eacsof Kenya, and I think this had been discussed and agreed in terms of how we handle these 4 or so hours that we have. So we've had our internal discussions, and the second session then is now for you to take us through the strategic planning. I know there are things you had shared, but it would be good for you to just explain to us so that then we plug in are attending virtually. And of course, I know from your infrastructure, you can see some of the colleagues who are attending virtually. So just to let you know the setup, so that then you can, guide us properly in terms of how we proceed. So I want to take the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to now formally welcome Richard. As I said earlier, Richard is a colleague whom we have had opportunity to interact before, particularly on issues of the Eacsof. So Richard, please take it up. We have up to 1 o'clock when we will break for lunch. Welcome.
Okay. A number of people. Now, the setup of what I wanted to do was really something that may have been much more easier done when we are together. But now that we get the best out of the process, and then ensure that we have the input from the Kenya chapter in the strategic plan. So for those who don't know me, my name is Richard Sewakirianga. I've been associated with the Eacsof, since its inception when I was at the NGO Forum as executive director, but I since left, and I'm now a senior research fellow at the Center for Basic Research. But I'm still working a lot with issues of civil society organizing and supporting several networks, as I shared in a short profile that I sent to Diana. So what we have done so far is we have had meetings that have happened physically in Burundi, in Rwanda, and in South Sudan. So those were really also very enriching. And now we are having this one, which is a hybrid, both physical and virtual. And then we shall have, I think, a physical meeting for Tanzania sometime in the last week of this month. And then after that, of course, I'll go ahead to draft the strategic plan, and the draft will be available. Now, from my understanding in terms of what I shared when we met, I don't know, do I able to see my slides, or just let me know if you are seeing what I've shared.
Yes.
You are able to see that?
Yes.
In a physical meeting, we could just form a few groups and do this work. But now that we have some people who are attending virtually and others who are attending physically, I think for the people in the virtual I can share the tools as a link to this in the chat, and then you can fill them in. So what in a sense, I think would be the best in terms of getting input is not to really just speak very, very generally, but to speak in a focused way. So what I then proposed is to work with 3 tools. We will do a pastel, a direct spraying, what that means. That helps us to get to understand the situational analysis. Now, the situational analysis here, which we'll be speaking about, is the situation in Kenya as a country, as you understand it, since we are talking about Kenya, but also the situation in East Africa from the lens of civil society that is operating in Kenya. Now, the point there is to try and anchor the strategic plan into an understanding of exactly what is the situation and what do we see as the factors that we have to take into consideration if we are going to engage and mean as Eacsof, both the Eacsof as a regional organization, but also Eacsof in its constituent chapters. So that will be the situation analysis, and I'll show you the tool that we shall be working with. Then in the next part, we want to move from the situation and saying like here in Kenya and in East Africa. So the next question then becomes, as Eacsof, how are we prepared to be able to respond? And there I therefore, introduce the SWOT analysis, which, as you all know, focuses on looking at the internal as well as the external conditions that allow an organization to be able to respond to the issues at hand. And then lastly is then to say, okay, now that we know internally and externally the conditions, we know the situation, how then do we intervene? And there I use a very short but focused needs assessment using some kind of gap analysis to be able to do that. So in the pastel, this is a tool which many people have used in different situations, but basically we will be looking at those kinds of areas. We'll be looking at the political dimensions, and that could be the government policies, the political stability in the region and in the country, issues like corruption, foreign policy, foreign trade or regional trade, poll taxes, policies, labor laws, trade restrictions, all those things that may have a political aspect to them or that require political negotiations. And then when we talk about E, the issues that we shall be focusing on are really those from the economic side. Unemployment, inflation, interest rate, and many of those kinds of things. And then for the social culture, we will then, which is the S, we will then look at what are the issues related to population growth rate, age distribution, safety, health, lifestyles, cultural barriers, any of those factors that can affect the work of Eacsof. Then for T is to look at technology and digital infrastructure across East Africa. Things like technology incentives, which ones do we have? What is the level of innovation, or what kinds of innovations will facilitate or hinder the work that we're doing? Things like technological change, awareness of technology, and all those kinds of things. And then for E, we shall then be looking at whether climate, environmental policies, climate change, and all those kinds of things, because that E is on environment. And then lastly is L, when we look, which focuses on the legal elements, things like laws, on different things. They could be consumer protection laws, copyright, health, anything. So that would be the pastel tool that we shall be looking at. Now, for each of these factors, as you'll see in the tool that I shared with you, my thinking would be to really take about 3 to 5, because at least in my experience, I know that 3 to 5 is really sufficient in terms of understanding. So if we have everyone giving us 3 to 5 perspectives, that will be that will be sufficient. And I'll share how we can do it after this short presentation. Then the other one will be the SWOT analysis. As I said, the SWOT analysis would look at the strengths, weaknesses on the x-axis, and then the threats and opportunities. And here again, it will look at them, like 5 factors. Of course, this purple part that you see here is something that if we were together in a meeting and sitting down, we could discuss, but we can broadly talk about that. But what we want to really achieve from this meeting is just to be able to list the strengths, the weaknesses, the threats, and the opportunities, at least the desired results that would like Eacsof to achieve. What do we need to be in place for Eacsof to move from where it is to get a good sense of what is it that we are working on. Now, in terms of the tools themselves, I'm going to show you the first one, which is the pastel analysis tool. I just say list at least 3. What we have done before is, depending on the number of people in the room, we could say, okay, for the political and economic factors, let's have a small group of 3 to 4 cultural and technological factors. And then a last group that can look at the legal and the environmental factors. And then after that, we can quickly have each of these groups presenting this. And then we can, after the presentation, have a short discussion to just make sure that we are clear about the kind of factors that we are talking about. And after that, we move on to the next one. So that would be the pastel tool, how it would be. The SWOT analysis is really straightforward. Many people have done this. But so what we want is really to list the strengths, the weaknesses, list the opportunities and threats. I've provided some, indicative questions that can guide, but it doesn't mean that those are the only ways you should look at it. You can just list the strengths and the weaknesses and opportunities and threats. And we can also hear back from people. And then the last one, which is the needs assessment. Again, there are just 3 questions. One is to describe from experience at least 3 major gaps that you think limit Eacsof from achieving this objective. Then the next question would be, what do you believe are the causes of those gaps, which you have identified? And the last one is to list 3 actions, 3 to 5 actions that could be used to undertake to address these gaps. So the last tool, and I hope that we can do this in the 2 or more, maybe 1.5 hours that we have given ourselves. So that's how we shall be proceeding. As I said, I can share this with the people online. You can then fill this in if you are online. We can then agree to give a chance to those who want to speak online and those who want to speak there in the room after we have put together each tool. Now, my request would be that then the people who are in the room, it would be good to send me these notes, either as a Word file or the PowerPoint. Just the
ID and the link so that you can also fill it from their end.
Okay, so how many people are with you physically?
About 7.
Okay, if
10.
they're about 7 or 10 people, I would propose that we just have 3 people discussing the political and economic issues, another 3 who can discuss the social and technological, and another 3 that can discuss the legal and environmental. And all they need to do is to just list 3 to 5 factors that they think are critical that Eacsof should take into consideration in the next 5 years. And after, I mean, this can be within about at most, instead of doing, because in one plenary, it will take a much longer time. And since we've given ourselves 2 hours, that could be one way to do it easily. Or is that okay?
It's okay. Yeah, we can use that method as well.
Okay, so now we can, do you have the tool, the pastel tool that I sent you available there with you? If you do, then I think what you could do is just to share with people so they can see it. And then we give ourselves 10 minutes. For the people online, I'm just going to put the tool in, all the 3 tools in the chat room, and then you can just download it straight onto your computer. You fill it in, and then you can email it to me. I think that will be easier for you. If that is okay, then I propose that we have those 3 groups set up, and then we can proceed with highlighting the different factors. Okay.
That's okay.
Okay. So should we say that the 10 minutes start now? We'll start again. So for the people online, let me share the tool with you. Yes, I see, Maloti, you wanted to get the previous one to inform the insights, but I don't have the previous pastel, so I may not be able to share with you. But as you said, certainly pastel is an important tool that you can use. So my view is let's work with what we have now, and then see what we can get in terms of the inputs. So I'm working now. I'm just downloading this and sharing it in the chat room, and you can download the tool and you start feeding in the parts. Of course, as you know, some of these things being done in hybrid fashion, they take some time, but hopefully we won't have any major issue. Colleagues online, I'm coming, I'm sharing right now. It's only that I had to close. So for now, colleagues online, it's just to say that what I've shared, you can download, and you just need to fill the part on pastel. You list, you just deal with the first column where you list 3 to 5 factors, and then we proceed from there. I hope that is fine. And as I said, we give ourselves 10 minutes. So at 11:40, I think we shall start, restart the conversation again. So I'll keep quiet for now and come back in the next 8 minutes so we can listen to the presentation. Thank you, guys. Let's see how this works. I hope the teams are ready to share. And colleagues who are online, I did share with you, so I hope you've been able to download that what I shared, and also I shared my email in case you want to send directly. That would be helpful. So just to know is, can we come back to the plenary? Is that okay?
Not yet, not yet. Could we have at least a bit, 10 more minutes?
How many more minutes?
10 will suffice.
Competition, an healthy competition.
Okay, by 11:50. Okay, fine. Okay. Is it a good time to restart now? Are you ready to start? Colleagues, can we start now with the short presentations from each of the groups? That is, if I hope you can all hear me. Colleagues online, if you are ready and you want to share your views, we'll be happy to also, I think, give you a chance to do that.
Yes, we could present what we have.
Okay. So, and we have the team that has been working on the political and economic, and here there are 3 to 5 factors. If someone is talking, then we can't hear. It could be that you muted.
What is the concept of yes, okay. Richard.
Yes, please.
This is Calvin.
Yeah.
In the region or in the individual countries, some countries in the region. And then also we have extremism as a factor, and then we have dictatorship or disregard to law as an issue, and then political issue, and then also we have government action as another factor.
What's the last one? I can't hear that properly.
Sorry, that is government actions.
Okay.
Yeah, those are maybe to begin with the opportunities in political uncertainties that we need to have there's a opportunity for dialogue between the countries and the leaders in the region. That's an opportunity. Yes, and then also in terms of extremism, we have an opportunity, or rather dictatorship with regard to law, which is a political in a way. We have to have or support democratic leaders and systems. For example, we have constitutions that are democratic. I mean, those that are democratic. Yeah, that are the leaders. So also in terms of the government actions, in terms of opportunities that we need to have political policies that are agreeable across the region, across the board.
Okay.
Yes. Of course, for extremism, in terms of is a great threat to the region because it brings a lot of instability and animosity and in terms of peace in the region. So yeah, I think that is what we talked of in terms of political. Maybe my team, anything I've left. Yeah, so maybe quickly also in terms of economic factors, the one that we really it is coming out having a lot of emphasis is the trade barriers across the borders, like Kenya and across this African region. So that is a factor that out. Then also we have a poor infrastructure systems, infrastructure that supports economic development in the region. Yeah, like the road, railway, yeah, so forth. And then also under trade barriers, actually, we are talking of tariffs and sanctions. And, yeah, then we talked of in brief, we talked of inflation as a factor. So we didn't get to agree on how to have that to have an opportunity from the inflation, but we are thinking of course, based on what Museveni said sometime last week of common currency. Yeah. So opportunities for trade barriers is that as a region we have huge space for opportunity in terms of economic growth because we were also giving an example of production in different sectors in the region, and if we could use the same capacities that we have as individual countries, we could make it a great opportunity for economic development. Okay. Then the one, if we agree on developing a common like a railway line, for example, from those from like the coastal region, we are talking of a lap set on the other end. We are talking of how can we can have it would be very economical to agree as a region to have common infrastructure, economic infrastructure. And then, of course, in terms of tariffs and sanctions, the opportunity for this is that we can agree to have to remove those barriers. There's an opportunity to remove the barriers, which is also a very threat to economic development. I think that is what we discussed as a team. If there's anything that I've left, yeah, agreeing that there's nothing I left. So that is our point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Calvin, for sharing. If I was in a room, I'd give you a clap, but Maurice can do that on my behalf. Okay, so can we go to the next group? We will come back and just have a broad discussion at the end.
I can report for the sociocultural and technology. Yes, Richard, are you hearing me? This is Suban.
Yes, Suban, I can hear you, but you are a bit faint, but probably you.
Let me get the technology closer now that I'm
that's much better. Thank you.
Yes, we were working on the sociocultural and technology. So under the sociocultural, we said that there are legal policy frameworks that are supposed population is poor are also more vulnerable to, for example, human trafficking, recruitment into violent extremism, terrorism, and so on and so forth. And so must, as we push for this, also guard against that. We have also said that technology could also be used to perpetrate cultural crimes like cash rustling. You know, the Karamoja and the Pokot.
Yeah.
Supposedly blood brothers, but when it comes to livestock, they are able to steal from one of their own and so on. So, and politically, it has been known that politicians, you know, invest in such crimes, either to destabilize regions or keep them fighting among themselves for political reasons, or to generate income for political causes. So those were the issues faced, yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I'm sure a clap will be deserved. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to the last group.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I'm presenting for the legal and environmental bit.
We have just lost our presentation,
but luckily we
remember
exactly what we discussed.
But we'll be happy
to share.
Yeah,
the dog ate.
The dog ate.
But don't worry,
you're in good hands.
So in terms of the legal factors,
we generally just indicated that this would include most of the laws that impact the kind of participants who are in the Eacsof space, especially because we have CSOs as well as the private sector.
So all these laws that look at issues of operations around civil society, private businesses,
small grassroots
This would be some of the factors that we talk about when we're looking at this particular context. We also discussed an issue around conflict of laws, especially because we as a region have various types of laws that cover different areas of operation, and the lack of standardization around this particular space then makes it a bit hard for the teams or the interested parties herein to work around some strategic interventions, projects and programs. So those were some of the factors we looked at, and also just awareness around these particular laws, that particular level of understanding, or even just the capacity for the technical people in these particular spaces. We figured that would be a factor that the teams need to consider or be keen on in the coming 5 years. And then in terms of opportunities, we noticed that there's room or space to harmonize these laws, because all of them are contextualized to fit the different spaces that we operate from. But we should be able to harmonize these particular laws, because then when we do that, we are able to work together closely. There's some form of speediness in terms of interventions, and also some form of understanding and shared goals. For threats in that particular space, we were looking at change of guard. Recently, Kenya just inaugurated a new president, so certainly they come in with different particular discussions or objectives or maybe goals. I know that is not something that would say for Uganda, but a change is expected somewhere in Tanzania, and so these particular constant changes would affect the legal spaces that this particular team will be working around. So that would be a threat if not looked into, or maybe if we don't plan ahead. We also looked at commercial interests. Commercial interests obviously sway the legal context every now and then, and this would be a threat if we don't then work around with the people who are in the commercial space in this particular Eacsof setting, to see how we can work with other people who are not with us. And then also unprecedented changes. And these unprecedented changes would even cut across all other aspects of the curb spread of pandemics. We do not know if we want to maybe think through or maybe project or contextualize. So that would be some of what we discussed as threats. And then when we go to environment, we'd look at issues of climate change and also the level of awareness around this particular topic of climate change. It would be conduct unbecoming for us to discuss environmental issues and not talk about climate change, especially because most of the Eacsof members possibly do the least when it comes to climate change, but create different spaces to discuss matters climate change. We also looked at another factor being the seasonal climate changes. From where we are in Kenya currently, we're suffering possibly one of the harshest levels of drought. In terms of opportunities, we realize that if we plan accordingly or ahead, we should be able then to have a voice to influence discussions around issues of climate change and even the seasonal climate issues that I've talked about. For instance, I'd ask, in November, we have a very high level meeting around climate change. And this is I just wrote the name, it's the Sharm el Sheikh discussion on climate change. Who from the Eacsof will be representing the team? Do we have anyone? Do we have a plan? Do we have an agenda? Are we able to sponsor, for instance, say a side event? So I think these are opportunities. If we organize accordingly, we should be able to influence these discussions. We have the numbers and the capacity. I think we would capitalize on these opportunities. We should also be able to influence and negotiate when it comes to matters around seasonal climate changes. Obviously because of the trade influence that we enjoy or we have. So I think that's something we can look at as opportunities, and also just having a stake in different state discussions. I do not know if we have done this, but I think going ahead we can structure it, maybe have a representative or a team or a committee or a working group, if that's something that we can do to capitalize on these particular opportunities that come up. And then in terms of threat, again, environmental issues are mostly influenced by acts of God. So we know for a fact that there are some changes that may come up that we may not be able to plan or maybe project or expect. So this would be a threat that we need to be alive to and maybe put up some contingencies with respect to that. And then another threat would be that our service delivery would be sort of mulled or slowed down, especially because of these particular changes that I have mentioned. And I think with environment, or rather the environmental issues, most of these things just tie very closely. It just depends on the context or the state in discussion, or maybe the different, if it is a CSO, if it is a private body, who we are talking about, and then we are able to then maybe separate some of those things, but they're closely tied together. This is what I can remember, but once our presentation is picked, I think we'll be able to share more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for a lost presentation. It's a very detailed, presentation. Thank you. I think broadly, before we wrap up and do now I realize that we have about 40 minutes now. I'm getting nervous. But are there any issues that our colleagues have had or haven't had that you think we should be paying attention to, especially at the level of factors that we should be in any of these areas? I would want to open up the discussion for if there is anything. I think I also got one online input from Bridget. Thank you. We will look at it, but probably we will not present it now, but at least we shall. I'll be able to take into consideration. But are there any other issues that you feel we haven't touched on that are important for Eacsof to note within the situational analysis of what would drive a strategic plan for Eacsof? Anything for now? I have a hand and don't know the share.
Richard, I don't know whether
Yes.
whether any of the groups brought up the whole politics around genetically modified organisms. Perhaps you are aware that recently Kenya has opened up its doors to GMO products, and that from and the spread of those organisms. There are also certain risks which are inherent in that, but perhaps more importantly is the region is not speaking in one voice in terms of this. We know that there are jitters already in Tanzania. They have expressed a concern over that policy shift. And so on. So I think that's one thing that probably should feature in any ongoing debate about policy, food security, and so on within the region.
Okay. I think that's an important thing because it also makes the linkage between technology, science, science and food and all that, and I think that's a critical thing. Because within the region, I don't think we have, as you have said, a consensus on approach. As you know, when we do the SWOT, we are really focusing on both the internal and the external, the strengths and weaknesses being those that are internal to Eacsof. And the good thing, there are a few veterans in the room who can help to sort of talk about that. So what I would love to do is for the groups, for us to just maybe divide out into 4. Know of Eacsof, and this is to really be honest enough and say, if we are to build an Eacsof that works, what are the strengths that we have that we can explore and work on, and also what are the weaknesses that we should be trying to work on and help to improve. And then is the opportunities which are in the external environment. We have mentioned a number of things that are related to the pastel, but those opportunities that collectively and not just collectively, which we can point out, I think would be important to know if we have those 5 or 3 to 5 opportunities. So also if we can spend about 15 minutes or 10 minutes to do that, and another 10 minutes we shall then use it to just look at the needs. And in terms of doing the needs, just as I presented in my PowerPoint, what we are really seeing is to say, if you look at Eacsof and the current results or the current impact or results that it is achieving, and you think about Eacsof that is successful, and here I'm going to leave you to imagine what a successful Eacsof looks like. What seem to be the gaps that need to be filled? What are the things that we need to make sure that they are filled if we are to achieve the success that we have always wanted in it? So, so that would be how I think we could take these next 2 tools instead of doing and then we do plenary. I propose that we do them together, and then we just do one plenary that then allows us to wrap up from the concept of both tools. So in that case, let me stop talking and allow you to either divide out in two groups, with one looking at strengths and weaknesses and another looking at opportunities and threats. And then for each of the groups, identifying for us the critical gaps that need to be filled for Eacsof to achieve the kinds of results that we wanted to achieve. So with that, I'll stop talking, and then we can reconvene after about 20 minutes to listen to those two. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so I will just pause here and let you go ahead with those two. Of course, we are doing this in a little bit of a fast mode, but I hope we are able to appreciate with our constraints of time and working with technology. So we'll do this in 20 minutes. So at 12:45, we shall come back then and listen to the two groups presenting, one on the strengths and weaknesses and what they have identified as the critical gaps that need to be filled for Eacsof, and then for opportunities and threats. And
I think so.
Two very powerful.
This is what we were discussing, because you cannot divide on opportunities and whatever. Because you don't know what where they have started from. So the two groups have to do everything. I don't know if you're getting me. Yeah, so you have to take one through the 4 stages. We cannot divide, like one does opportunities and threats and the other one does. We could, but then we wouldn't be talking about the same.
Let's see what comes out of it.
The other way of doing it is to be active listeners. The first group starts by identifying, then the moment you listen, you start working out the opportunity. Sorry, Maurice, you're suggesting something. The last one was a bit of a joke.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, let's, we just do it and see how it comes out. I see what you're saying. There's that gap. But now the disadvantage we have is that time is also counting. Can we just try it out and see how it comes out?
Try everything, try dividing.
The way he had said we do
one group does strengths and weaknesses and other opportunities and threats.
Yeah, and I know some of the things have been discussed already.
Do you want me to say something, or it's okay?
I think it's okay.
So the Suba group will take what? Suba, pick. We are giving you the opportunity to pick what your team will deal with.
We can look at strengths and weaknesses.
Okay. Isabella, your ladyship. Please. So we do what is left.
We do strength.
You have no choice.
Okay.
The choice for stretches.
Sorry, Suba. The Suba group is doing what again?
Strengths and opportunities.
Strengths and opportunities.
You could do strength and weakness.
So they're doing strengths and
weaknesses.
As we're doing opportunities and threats.
Okay, yeah. So as opportunities and threats. Yeah.
Oh. What does the Eacsof do? Bringing together diversity.
Yeah, mesh. on Masters East Africa. On Masters East Africa, because the focus is not on this. Okay, on that. Okay, so this one. And the other one would be liaising the Ministry of East Africa, or whatever, if you like, East Africa Secretariat. The working relationship is there. The membership kind of mobilization, which is a key aspect, is there is much more formal. The mobilization has not just good. So that is under the weekend. So what it can improve on? It's on the borderline. It's not because like at least up to about 65 but then it can be better. Like the ministry keeps on telling us that they want at least 200. So looking at that standard, I think it's a weakness. So that is usually a problem. Even just getting them consistent. I think they are mobilizing
opportunities and threats.
We're doing opportunities and threats.
Yeah?
Opportunities and threats.
Because we have reached out to them.
Which one? Oh, this one.
The table. Yes.
So this one, yeah, I can. Sorry, oh, I fill it out as we go. Okay, so what would be your opportunities?
Yeah, what do you do?
Right now,
just from the strand, we have been able to attract the available donor kind of resources.
Small letters at
we have also been able to draw in the membership.
Alafu mimi the case doesn't matter kwa email. Are you serious? You can be really nice.
Even the hosting. So those are the resources we have been able to use. What are the unique resources? We have been government funds, but Kenya, I don't think that's a very good idea. Comes with strings attached. It comes with, like in Rwanda, it does. What are the resources?
Presence in those countries. It's easy to know what is happening in Uganda. The situation in Uganda. Yeah.
So
there is opportunity for exchange and sharing of best practices. So that's more of an opportunity.
Yes, so like in Kenya, you reminded me something. We could do better in terms of that. Most of the Eacsof concentration is on national aid. The counties we are weak. So like that, there's a weakness. What do we call it? The national reach, particularly the government. So it would connect in terms of the way the question is framed. You see the regions are sourced and draw from.
partnerships. What's that? Harmonization, right?
The counties.
Yeah, the mere fact that we have to make
Yeah. Yes, they are better first. Can we, if we can't find any now unique, we come back and we can think of any other resources so that what we're using now, like membership. What would be the other everybody normally says we can draw from private sector. I don't believe. Yeah, but then we could be able to put it.
But there's also an opportunity for us to leverage the resources the private sector access.
They look at CSOs as an individual to tell them that's the biggest problem. So, for instance,
I
it's
see the
almost
partnership,
impossible
but
for
there's
Safaricom to fund, to give something to Kenya Human Rights Commission. If you are, for instance, a CSO that is doing a health initiative, then they listen to you. But if you are the right sort of then you actually are in terms of, because you comment on things that they are not doing well. So even under their social, what they call it, their responsibility, whatever they don't think it would be good use of their money, the corporate social responsibility. So yes, we get support from private sector foundations, but not Kenyan ones. Like for instance, Mastercard Foundation, Ford Foundation, but of course then they have got that stage that kind of reason. The Kenyan one is still very basic, the private sector.
When you mention CSR, I just learned something. What does Eacsof do in terms of CSR?
What we
in Kenya, CSR. CSR is limited to organizations.
But you know that's actually, you can leave that in the
all we do is
That's
that,
because
it's a proper defined social responsibility, that's what we do. But then in the narrow Kenyan
based on an act of God, it's like, let me now
it's like those donations. So we
you get,
don't do
it's something unnatural and outside of like when you're drafting a contract, you did project that you don't have code, who would have thought, and even that bad. So
Even if it's not donation, to like take part in the activities.
Yeah.
Like for example, they say there is once in a proposal.
As much as possible, we try to, as much as the resources and whatever allow. For instance, during the COVID-19, we supported cross-border women put cases, a case in court when their market has been closed, and the court ruled in the favor of the women, the market was reopened. You know, that is all social responsibility. Even,
keep in mind, we don't have a,
of course, we were with the ministry talking to the Ugandans about allowing the women to cross the border, even though the rules
so if the global
were
context
against it.
shifts,
Talking
for
to the
instance,
county government, the county
issues of
health department said
security,
that
issues of human rights.
they were not consulted, so even
And
some
you
of
need
the
to
rules put in place are meaningless.
For instance, there is no African
You can still trade safely,
in
you know, like those kinds of
in the
things.
security, what do they call it?
Contribute.
Because it's France, US, China,
In the broader sense of the word, not in the narrow.
There was
you see, there's no African representation.
African.
And you notice that 60% of the world is African. But we don't have representation. So they will straight to them and say,
it's like because it was looking at the broader kind of environment.
I don't know, they're there, but
they make a decision on this or
concepts of budgeting.
They always
The
do
post-COVID
Ukrainian
now,
war has
when we
affected
go to
Uganda so
countries,
much.
what would be the
They are selling a liter of petrol at 200 Kenya shillings.
Now you have to optimize
Some consultant I go
structured monitoring of like what they are doing. Then we have the climate, as you say, that someone said we are not as much involved in climate.
Kenya
There are
is
not resources there. So I think we'll say that Because there's a lot of money.
No, they wanted to
position themselves.
But you see,
Sometimes
on this high end,
national media
regular management, and we are never aware of what they
they have this campaign. Of
could
course, they are doing it very selfishly. They want to take credit. So they don't partner with others.
Yeah. What do they call it?
The mere fact that they invest in such very offensive,
Yeah, the Kakamega
With an umbrella body of
yeah.
CSOs.
Yeah, but the corporate sector has also like is now that the policy on farming in forests now undermined.
It's like a workshop.
The workshop.
The
Nika kusema media whatever pale not a competition, it's just a workshop.
Then what would you say that would be the upcoming of similar strengths? So that would mean that there's
Similar umbrella body for the CSOs.
So far it remains the only
similar, like same course and similar like
network that brings in society.
Umbrella, maybe there's a...
It could even be same. No,
so that's
you and I can go and just something we name it differently, put a different mission.
So that's
That's competition.
No, see, competition is based on if you are
one of the strengths is by
see, you and I
commented about this.
I understand you and I
Because
we want to do
you have to
something
work
that
with the
makes us
ministry.
strength, but during registration, we
So
find it
that,
different. But we are competing
for
with
instance,
Maybe you can just do
at the Secretary General's Forum,
you can come up with that. Maybe you maintain East Africa, but the other body
you change
change
something.
something.
because you have a
But in essence,
policy
in fact,
framework that forces government now to be present. So that's a strength. Like Burundi now has actually been forced by the policy now to, at least the new government, the one that is in place, do not have enough sense to see that. But then it forces government that's necessary. As a strength. Okay, so
what trends?
we have listed number one, yes, that we have added the environment. Yes,
Oh,
yes,
me, I'll go anywhere you want me to go, but here threats are not
understanding. But then we even discussed it at the office level. What is it?
Can I just write it down? It's in my
Because
head.
there are a lot of opportunities there. And now, it's an area you can't escape because the European Union now has
No, I'm saying this was in my head.
for
I don't
any
know.
kind of proposal now you have to come up with where
Okay, you know, I'm not
yeah.
You're still like them.
In terms of fewer areas, as we just feel in as well as yet we have fewer resources than others.
What can you say?
Number two.
Number two is what?
What trends?
Oh, trends.
That's what it's going to be.
So what would be the opportunity?
In which areas there's yet to have fewer resources
Trends in the country.
than others, because we do not list.
Trend, rule of law, appreciation of good.
So a correct answer be like we don't have resources from private sector.
Or no, say appreciation you're there, right?
Or could it be that we don't have resources to travel?
Adherence to the rule of law. We can also
For instance, the issue that was just raised about this conflict
It's what
and so far that we have, so it could be like resources to be able, and they're quite difficult to raise those types of resources.
It's true.
Keep tabs on all that's happening around the world and be able to attend for them. Most donors don't see that as a
Are we ready to start our reporting?
Many of the other countries from
But it was peaceful when Magufuli did with Museveni. And they were given in
No, but
yes, we don't agree, but most of it is peaceful.
Eacsof does not just have 12,000
Because we're
East African community is about everybody.
is that you can plan with them, you can interact with them, you can invest in them. Are they not?
And we have 12,000
relatively stable
and 3,000 active.
relatively.
Only those that are registered under the
Yeah.
protein society.
Okay. Are we ready to start?
Eacsof should take up this. How do we frame that?
Yeah, yeah.
There's a protocols.
The protocols, but also the capacity to be able to react
What's the train?
because like for
Now
us,
we can travel
the focus appears to
Right. Are we ready to start the presentations? We are already at 13 minutes to 1. And you want to give each group at least about 5 to 7 minutes for the presentation. Can we do that? When you are ready, let me know.
I think we can begin.
Yes, Richard, we can begin. We looked into, we are the group that looked into the strengths and the weaknesses. Now, starting with the strengths, one of them is that the fact that Eacsof brings together. Then there is the liaison and working relationship with the Kenya government and Secretariat of the East African Community. I think that is a strength that is more or less almost unique to Eacsof. Then the third one is that it provides a framework for CSO and government collaboration, so that even if government may not have the political will, the existence of that framework, pulls the government to act on certain, targets that have been set at the regional level. The unique resources, we say that Eacsof is able to tap into donors and members to support a number of activities. We recognize that under the African Development Bank, for example, there have been resources for climate change mitigation. We also saw ADB, intervene during the COVID-19 pandemic, where they were able to convene virtual sessions and enable civil society actors to identify mechanisms for collaboration with governments in terms of developing resilience, but also supporting communities that were adversely affected by the pandemic. We also say that Eacsof could tap into county-based CSOs. We here in Kenya have a devolved system of government, but it's been pointed out that most of the membership, 65 plus, members of the Eacsof are national NGOs or CSOs, and therefore there is that opportunity to tap into county-based organizations to strengthen itself and its outreach. We said that Kenya boasts of one of the most organized private sectors. We have the Kenya Private Sector Alliance that Eacsof can tap into, but a lot of this is hampered by mutual suspicion. There is a feeling from the civil society side that the private sector is partly to blame for some of the ills afflicting society, including corruption. They are one of the large-scale partakers of the vice, and so that has hampered working relationship with civil society, including some of the don'ts that civil society groups have developed against accepting certain support. Because for civil society, they look at how, the money was generated in the first place, and some of it has been generated through, corruption, including stealing COVID-19 intervention resources. An example was given when Eacsof intervened and went to court on behalf of cross-border women traders around Busia and Malaba when their markets were closed. And so this was a typical example of, Eacsof acting in the interest of, cross-border communities that do business at the border points. The weaknesses, of course, I've alluded to this. The mobilization of members can be done better. We have, even within one regulatory framework alone, over 12,000 organizations registered, for example, under the NGO Coordination Act. Yet, Eacsof has a membership of about 65, so you can see how that becomes a drop in the ocean. Then there is involvement of county-based CSOs that could be improved on. As I've said already, most of the members, current members, are national, as opposed to groups that are also working to check the excesses and otherwise of county-based governments that are 47 in number in this country. We also say the Eacsof can tap into corporate social responsibility by private sector to improve interventions on the environment and climate change generally. We have seen, for example, in Kenya, Nation Media Group, for example, sponsoring the fencing, the perimeter fencing of the Aberdare Range. Aberdare Range is one of the water towers in this country. Even the reclaiming of the Mau, I think Nation Media Group did a bit of that. We have seen Total, for example, the oil company, engaging in tree planting and reforestation of Amboseli and other national parks. Then Eacsof has no resources from the private sector. Then there is also the issue of limited capacity of Eacsof to react to what is happening regionally. There are civil society actors in Kenya that have felt that, when, for example, elections are perceived to have been rigged in Uganda, that Eacsof is better placed to issue a statement on behalf of the sector. Yet, issues of protocols tend to hamper because of the working relationship Eacsof has with the government and the East African community. Can such statements be issued without being perceived to have stepped on certain toes and people who have a lot of leverage at the regional level and so on? So I think those are some of the issues that we discussed, unless members have something to add, but that is what I could be able to report.
Thank you. Are you going on to say something about the needs?
We didn't go to that. You cut us short. We have the capacity, but you cut us short. So we didn't discuss the needs here.
Then listen to the other team, and then we see how to handle that.
Okay. It's not the easiest to go after my former boss, Mr. Suba, but let me take a stab. Yeah, he was a good boss, still is.
So the team was tasked with looking at opportunities and threats. We've listed them down successfully. This time we still have our presentation. So in terms of opportunities that are open to Eacsof, we've indicated that we have an opportunity to strategically engage, and we've given an example of what we had discussed before on high-level discussions, such as the climate change one, the GMO discussion at all levels, especially the technical, legal, social, and economic. We've also listed another opportunity as being the high-level partnerships that we can engage in. We've also looked at the future looking like it's opening up to us being able to harmonize our laws despite the different contexts that we operate in. We've also looked at enhancing regional coordination of partner states. I think with harmonization of laws, then we enhance the coordination. We've also listed strategic capacity building as a key opportunity, especially because the space that we are going into in the coming years requires all the technocrats that we can get, and so strategic capacity building is important. We've left that a bit open. I think we'll discuss more when we get time. But on threats, on the trends in the country or region, what trends in the country or region should Eacsof take advantage of? So the first one is the adherence to rule of law. That was a critical trend. We've also listed that the states have relatively stable political transitions. And the word relatively is the key word here, given some of the member states and what they've been doing. We also have active public participation and accountability. That's a good trend, especially at the policy level. We've also had peaceful coexistence between Eacsof partner states. And that we have mentioned the free trade movement as a key example for that particular point. The third one, how can Eacsof turn its strengths into opportunities? We only have one for now, given the time constraints, and this is by enhancing national engagement. Mr. Suba indicated that we have 69 members who have a national coverage, and we have other persons in the private sector spaces. So we think that this particular strength can be turned into opportunity. For instance, we could ensure that strategic positions are created for us, either at the government level, at the regional level, and obviously at the global level. We'll enhance that as we move along, but for now, we'll move to the threats and what threats could harm Eacsof. We've looked at trade barriers. We've also looked at poor infrastructure. We've looked at state loans. Mr. Richard, I'll have you know that Kenya has been slapped with a very hefty fine of 1-point-something billion. They've defaulted. So, I mean, if you have such state loans,
by who?
By China.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
We engaged with them on a contractual agreement for the SGR, but that one we can have a chat on the side. Then we also have the change of guard, again, as a threat. So that influences political interests. We've also looked at another threat, maybe upcoming umbrella bodies that do what Eacsof does, and that could also be a threat. We've also checked an alarming trend in human rights violations. That sort of curtails free engagement, lobbying, and maybe even just speaking up. Another one would also be the conflict of laws if we do not harmonize. We listed that as an opportunity, but it also falls under threats. And then what is Eacsof's competition doing? My team members are guiding me not to mention names, but to simply give you the pointers. So the competition, or rather the competitors, are advocating for human rights issues. They are organizing their members according to their mandates and their deliverables. They are also engaging at a policy level. They are undertaking evidence-based research and studies. They are also capacity building. And from their studies, they are issuing periodic reports that are useful for their members to project, to plan, to context set. And they are also working with cross-border traders to enhance trade engagements. So that's what they're doing. On the other space we were discussing on was what threats do Eacsof's weaknesses expose it to? So first, disintegration. We are exposed to a high disintegration. We have quite a number of members, and if our weaknesses are not addressed, then we will be easily disintegrated. There's also a high chance of misinformation, failed projects and interventions, infiltration and politicization of agendas. We'd also have poor branding. And obviously poor branding comes with lack of funding or inadequate resources, both human and...
Have you touched the needs at all?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay, so we now have, at least we have a good sense and depth on the SWOT. Now, I also recognize that we have gone overboard by 3 minutes. But the thing is that...
yeah, the secretary, not of Eacsof now, but the East African community. Because, you know, a lot of activities we do drive towards, like, you know, the Secretary General's Forum, the policy work, and drive towards the organization of the East African community, the East African Legislative Assembly, the Court of Justice. The Court of Justice has not been performing very well. So, you know, if they don't perform at the secretariat level, then it becomes difficult for an organization like Eacsof now to be able to deliver, because they're not completing. For instance, there's a big backlog of policies that the sectoral councils and the summit, which as heads of state, are supposed to have ratified, discussed. There's a very, very big backlog, partly because the summit has been kind of a moribund. The heads of state, like when Magufuli came in, that was about the worst time. He disengaged, and they actually wouldn't have whatever. Thank goodness COVID-19 happened, so it became a convenient excuse. But then they were hardly having meetings. You know, Arusha is in Tanzania, but then you don't have Tanzania attending. Those kinds of things. So it becomes difficult now if the center is not holding. The East African Community Secretariat itself, for you now, there's nothing to anchor, to whatever to anchor like your action on. So even when you ask for funding, there has to be an assurance to the donor that you're going to get somewhere with the policy. But then you cannot assure, because I mean this is really not the case. So we also have that as a third problem. We can discuss.
I don't know whether there's someone taking this down, because we still need to present.
Yeah. Diana, you're not taking it.
I had stepped outside.
Come again. The first one we said
the secretariat
on the
part of the regional
a diplomatic way of framing it.
Or challenges faced by
the challenges
regional
faced by the. I don't know if it would be offensive to say long term, because they are not going away. The long term kind of challenges to do with capacity, to do with the staffing, to do with and to do with coordination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so we are saying the second one is, because resources to me are part and parcel of those challenges.
Yes.
So then there is the issue of the weaknesses inherent in the integration process itself.
Yeah.
In particular, in regard to institutions that are supposed to spearhead regional integration.
Diana, I don't see you writing.
No, she's writing.
Oh. Yeah, because that's a way, like what I was discussing actually, Maurice has brought out the umbrella. For instance, what I was sharing about the Secretary General's Forum, those are weaknesses with the institution of the East African community. So those weaknesses also affect. For instance, on the CCGD's part, there was money that the donors mostly.
Right. So it looks like you are back. We lost connection for some time. But if you are back, just let me know if when the groups are ready to make the presentation. Thank you.
This one we shall do. We'll make one presentation. So finally, how do we tackle the issue of the issue of shrinking space is still important.
Yeah, it's actually a key issue. Just put it that way.
So shrinking civic space is still very important. So we have these 3 points. The first one that maybe you can read them back. So the first one that is limitations and challenges faced by the regional secretariat, that's the Eacsof now. And we have the responses, capacity, staffing, and so on. Then we said resources part of this one. Then weaknesses inherent in the integration process, and this has to do with the institutions of integration. And then shrinking civic.
Colleagues, I just to find out, are we ready to present?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So
okay. Sorry, I we lost connection, so I wasn't sure. But please go ahead, since we've eaten into your time. Or you had started.
Okay, so we have 3 points.
So this is number 1.
Yes, please.
Oh, this is like.
So we have the first one being the limitations and the challenges faced by the regional secretariat. And this has several layers to it, possibly being the staffing issues, the capacity issues, coordination, which is a bit long, so that being the first one. It also has another level to it, being the resources part. This is both human and the financial bits of resources. So I think that when you go into your own time, you could then disintegrate it as we have. The second one being the weaknesses that are inherent to the integration process itself. These are quite many, and I think my seniors here would be happy to explain, but that was the second one. And the third one, obviously, would be the shrinking civic space. In essence, what the civil societies in the space have done over the years wouldn't warrant or even explain where we are. For instance, Kenya still remains an unobstructed state as per the Civicus Monitor. I think we could do better than that. So that would be the third key point. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Weaknesses in integration, here you are talking about those systemic weaknesses in the integration process as a whole.
Yes, as a whole.
So how does that become a gap for Eacsof? That's what I wanted to get a bit more clarification on, if you may.
Oh, clarity you'll get. Mr. Morris here is just gearing towards explaining it to you.
Yes, he's the guru on this thing, so he better tell us.
Yes. I don't know about guru, but yeah. So it becomes a stumbling block, for example, when you have institutions that are always acting at the behest of governments. In other words, the failure to establish what we would call supranational institutions and a culture of supranationality. That means that we donate sovereignty as partner states to institutions that then can make decisions on our behalf. We know that a couple of years ago, when the court made a decision that was not favorable to the regime in Kenya, that led to the treaty being amended to sort of tell the court that you only operate as per, when we empower you to, so we have those kind of things. So what I see across the region and probably even across Africa is that failure to accept that you are actually ceding some sovereignty to these institutions. And that is the meaning of integration. So it becomes a limitation to us as civil society, because whereas we think we are engaging institutions that are making decisions, it seems their power to actually make decisions and drive the process is actually fairly limited.
Just to add on that also, most of the work that we do as Eacsof, both at the national and regional level, is also hinged on the working out of those institutions. For instance, that the summit, the African Legislative Assembly, and actually accede to them. That the Council of Ministers is able to discuss the policy kind of recommendations from the SG's forum and so on and so forth, and move them to the next stage. This is not happening at a pace that kind of supports the activities of the Eacsof chapters and even the regional Eacsof. So just as an example, most of the time the donor funding we get is hinged towards achieving an objective. So when those institutions don't work, it means you're not going to achieve the objective of policy reform, and therefore it undermines even the fundraising. The donors will ask you, are you sure that the regional kind of institutions are going to work, so that if we put money in this, there's going to be a result at the end of it? Just as an example. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's very, very clear now. I've got the point, and I think it's a very important point. Sometimes you don't see how much that affects the work. Is the other group also have any gaps to share, or are these for everyone?
No, we made one presentation, so after
okay.
Discussion, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you are saying that these elements are the gaps that you see that we need to also address within the next 5-year process.
True.
So I guess, as I said before, this is really helpful, of course, with the constraints of not being with you physically. I would have been happy to show the connection that I'm making, but maybe to summarize what in essence I see getting out of these 3 presentations. Well, first of all, I think on a practical note, I hope Diana can collect all the materials that have been presented there and just email them to me. I've taken some notes, but I would want to validate if what I wrote is what is represented there. So I'll wait to see that. If somebody can share that with me, then that would be really, really helpful. And I think since we have already been in touch with Diana, she should be able to help with that, hopefully. And then in terms of how I see this all coming together, the idea why I thought it would be good to do a pastel, a SWOT, and a gaps analysis is because it would be helpful for us to be able to say that this is the context across East Africa. And now we have the opportunity that for all the 3 countries, all the 5 countries that we have consulted, 1 more to go, we have already established in some kind of broad way what kinds of issues we need to touch on. We now have the perspective from South Sudan, perspective from Burundi, perspective from here now Kenya, and also the perspective of Rwanda, and also for Uganda. So when we get the perspective of Tanzania, then I think we shall be able to build a broad understanding. What I'll do is I'll then enrich these contributions with some literature review. Now, from that, I think the SWOT analysis and what it has helped us to do and what I'll be drawing from that is to get a sense of what is it that we should be focusing on in terms of the areas that will be used to frame the strategic direction in terms of strategic interventions that the Eacsof should be touching on by looking through some of the weaknesses, but also the strengths. And then on the side of opportunities and threats, we should also be able to say, what is it that we are picking from that side to enrich what Eacsof can do in the 5 years. And I think for the gaps that you have shared, those will now be able to be the bedrock, which we can now turn around and say, if we turn around these gaps into positive outcomes, they can form what we see as the goal that the Eacsof should be achieving in the next 5 years. So that's how we will be using the material that you have shared with me. If people have any additions that they want to share, I'll be much more, I'll be happy and to receive any additional contributions and anything that you think you would want to share with me. The way this is going, as I understand it, is that there will be a validation meeting sometime. But also, I think if we can, we could do one online so that people are able to look at the draft that I will have produced. I'm aiming to see if we can get one out by the close of this month so that we can then use that to have a discussion and finalize the document. And that will give us a sense. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to do this online. It is always not simple, but at least we have been able to stay online and be able to do the things. I will finish here for now, and then I'll hand over back to you in the room, Maurice and others, to give me a closing and exit, and I will leave you to continue the rest of the day.
All right, so thank you, Richard. I think this has been great in terms of our own reflections here, and kind of just connecting what is happening now domestically, whether it's political, economic, and so on, with what is happening at the regional level. So that in terms of that reflection, it has been really, really great. And for us here, of course, it has also been an opportunity to reflect on some of our own internal matters, and members have been good enough to really share their perspectives on this as well. So for Richard, we want to thank you for driving this process, and hopefully, of course, we will have a product at the end of it, and a product that then will be able to move Eacsof forward. I think we've all invested a lot in Eacsof And so we all have an interest in seeing it succeed beyond where it is right now. So thank you very much. And therefore, we will continue with our process as we close this meeting on our side.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. I will sign up now, and thank you very much for your participation and kind cooperation.
Great, great. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so that's where we are. I think we've generally made good progress, looking at where we started in the morning with the internal discussions and how that has sort of tied in with what Richard has taken us through. I know that on the agenda we don't have, we have basically gone through all the sections that we needed to, but I think it is important to say, is there anything that any one of us feels, you know, any point that maybe something that could move us forward, anything that we feel that should be said in this meeting in the context of this discussion, before I invite Machete to give us closing remarks, and then we break for lunch. So just an opportunity for one or two people who would want to just say something as we conclude. Okay, I think we are comfortable. Sorry, did I see a hand? No. Okay, I think we are comfortable, and thank you, because that's feedback for me. It means I've done a great job in terms of chairing. And I always like reminding colleagues that if you go back to my CV immediately after I left college, chairing meetings was one of my hobbies. These days I don't put it, because at some point people started saying, but how can you say this? Meetings are the most difficult things to deal with. As long as I'm not writing minutes and notes right away. So thank you very much, and for me, I also thank you guys, the Secretariat and everyone, for giving me an opportunity to chair this meeting. To you, Machete.
Yes, so thank you very much, and nothing much to add, just to thank all of us for having turned up and kind of discussed issues to do with the regional kind of strategic plan. One of the things I've just kind of found out is that it's possible quite a number of people were not contacted, and this was not deliberate. It was purely an omission. It may have to do with the list that Diana, who did the invitations, used, and I had already mentioned that she's hardly 3 months old. So it's possible. So what I've asked her to do is to do an audit, meaning that she kind of looks at all the invitations and what she used, and then we'll compare it with who was supposed to be invited. And next week we are going to communicate back in terms of if there was an omission, in terms of like Omilo just in the middle of the meeting sent a message complaining that he had not been invited. So this was a very big omission that one wouldn't expect, particularly since Omilo worked for Eacsof as whatever, as a youth kind of, so it would be a very big omission. And Ikra, it's where he works now, is a key member of Eacsof. So for those who felt, at least those of you here must have gotten the communication. I apologize, but then I have to get the facts about like who was not, and I just pledge that this is not going to happen again. Like in future, this will have to be looked into. The other thing that we promised is that since we didn't have enough time in this meeting to discuss Eacsof issues. We will arrange for at least one other meeting before the year ends, where issues including also the Kenyan strategic plan are going to be like discussed. So look out for this. We will at least have a virtual meeting, but then better we could have a hybrid meeting like the one that the one that we had today. Lastly, on the Secretary General's Forum, just to urge, as I had said, there has been a lot of confusion, and this is also part of the feedback we have given in terms of going forward on the regional strategic plan. Because of lapses, institutional lapses in Arusha, and by Arusha I'm talking about the East African Community Secretariat. Since most of the work we do drives towards conclusion within the different kind of institutional frameworks of the East African Community kind of secretariat, key among them being the councils of ministers that look at, they have grouped themselves into different kind of sectors where the policies that we discuss end up there before they are passed on now to the summit, which is where the heads of state meet. So the summit has, over the past few years, had serious issues about heads of state attending meetings or even just setting meetings. And the immediate past chair, Uhuru Kenyatta, was quite enthusiastic at trying to individually visit countries, talk to them, and so on and so forth. So those kinds of weaknesses have also really seriously affected our capacity as a member chapter, but also the capacity of the East African community, the capacity of the regional office of Eacsof to be able to complete their work. Organs that are supposed to be passing the policies, kind of giving us feedback about what we have given, including even the regional parliament, East African Legislative Assembly. Laws are taking extremely long in terms of after the passing, the other kinds of processes that are supposed to go through. So these are things that we have put in the strategic plan, and there are also things that we are going to continue pushing at the national level. So the SG's forum will also be an opportunity for us to present this, and we hope that there is going to be a change. So with that, I wish you a very good afternoon and success or good luck in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Recording ended. Record February 13th, 2022. 5. Shutting down.
Thank you. Diana, I don't know why you're looking so far. These people want to hear if there's lunch. So that they go for lunch.